Welcome, everybody, for this session. Say a little prayer for me. And I have with me today a fantastic panel. Wonderful, wonderful people that I have been working with for quite some time. And I'm happy to introduce them to you. Like their bios are on the website for Outsummit. Please have a look at them because these folks have done such amazing work in many, many ways. So I can't read it all, but let me introduce to you Shamim Shalim from Kenya, Nairobi. And Shalim is a BA in international relations. But she's also a lesbian, Muslim, disabled, feminist, and human rights activist. I hope I didn't forget anything in that phrase, Shalim. Great. So that's Shalim. Also with me, Ifashina Efunyemi. And Ifashina is a human rights defender and co-founder of an organization with the most amazing name that I found, POWA, the Productive Organization for Women in Action. So Ifashina, welcome as well. And last but not least, I have with us Davis Makiala. And Davis has done many things and has been active for a long time. But he's also, and that's important for this discussion, the founder of the Interfaith Diversity Network of West Africa. So with this panel, we're going to have a good conversation. But of course, I want you all to join. So if you have any questions, please put them in the chat box. I will pick them up from the chat box, and there will be time for panelists to ask to get the questions answered. So if you have any question, please put them in the chat box so we can read them there. What we're going to do is look at what has been plaguing our community all over the world for quite some time, and it's not going away. And actually, over the last couple of months, there have been more incidents with religious homo and transphobia in many places in the world. So what we're going to do is asking our three panelists to give a little bit of the context that they're working in, combating religiously based homo and transphobia, and what the activities that they are doing to combat this. It's a big question. I hope you can give a brief overview of about 5 to 7 minutes, and then let's have a discussion about commonalities and common strategies that we should apply as a movement in combating this religiously based transphobia. I also need to reveal that my panelists all are or have been fellows in Outright's Religion Fellowship. So I'm very proud to have the fellows here with me today. So kicking it off, about context, what's happening in your strategies. Davis, may I give you first the floor?
Oh, thank you very much for giving me the stage first, and I bring you greetings from Ghana. Here, I think that what's going on is about the religious right wings that take the pleasure of always putting out rhetorics that give a bad image of the messaging that further present LGBTIQ people as evil and as bad things. Not too long ago, the World Congress of Family decided to target Ghana, knowing that Ghana is one of the peaceful, tolerant country in West Africa, where we live like don't ask, don't tell, kind of. It's not the best situation. So the World Congress of Family came here last year and had their conference, and the messages they brought was like talking about family, forgetting that we know family, we have family, and we understand what our family values are as different from the American conservative right-wing type of family. So they came anyway and injected their method of draconian belief or understanding of family into not only the local their local partners, but targeting all sects of religious leaders. Am I communicating?
Yes, totally. Please continue.
Yeah. So yes, so they were targeting both the traditional, the Muslim and the Christian leaders, but also they were targeting politicians. And the outcome of that, their messaging was that politicians begin to buy into such messages, especially as the time that the national election was drawing closer. We begin to hear politicians that says, oh yes, we won't allow this because LGBT has always been scapegoated, and their message is one of the message that they use in order to attract more votes from the opposition. But also the impact of that foreign religious evangelist group coming to Ghana or West Africa was that it laid the ground for the preparation we were doing to host the Pan-African ILGA that was supposed to come to Ghana. As soon as the World Congress of Family left and it became known that this group was coming to Ghana, the message began to come out that some religious leaders were saying that Pan-African ILGA should be refused visa, they should be banned, they shouldn't be allowed to come into this country, they are not welcome, and all hostile activity began to go around the conference. It was hostile for those of us in country, it was hostile for Pan-African ILGA. I mean, I was ashamed in the way that some politicians and government leaders, as well as religious leaders, take it upon themselves to move away from welcoming strangers and hospitality as part of the core foundation of our religion and begin to stand out threats and hostility, not only on the expected strangers, but also onto us. So these are some elements of religious messages that is creating trouble. Politicians were encouraged to adopt manifesto that if they win election, they will further criminalize LGBT people and their family and their community. So the messages that was coming out from the religious right wing wasn't at all good, and sadly, some government officials and political parties adopted it and try to make use of it, whereby claiming and making it hostile for us. But we did not take it kindly. We want to prove that we are not strangers. We want to prove that we are here. We want to prove that we are existing. So we also find ourselves in those spaces where these discussions were going on. And also, we use the language that they understand. We make them understand that these people you are talking about are your children and are your family, and that we are not strangers. So if you refuse some section visa, how about your children and your family that are right in front of you? And so we did not use the hit and run intervention by being rude. In West Africa, we know how to engage in elderly conversation. You don't shout at your elders when you speak to them, whether they are saying what is wrong or right. So we understand the culture and the tradition, and we engage our government as well as our leaders, as well as our parents, through the way that they can understand. Things are not so perfect yet, but the church knew, the traditional leaders knew, government knew that LGBT people in Ghana exist, and that we are there, and that we are not going away. So that is our situation with what's going on that I can tell you for now.
Great. A big question for all three of you. So, but I'm asking you now already that question: what makes their message so attractive for politicians, for religious leaders, for the people, that people buy into it? And I'm going to ask the same question to all three of you. But Davis, maybe you can give us a hint already. What makes it attractive?
Well, you know, West Africa, Ghana is a deeply religious country. And also, you remember that we are evangelized by our colonial masters. Colonialism is still very much in existence in Ghana and in West Africa largely, even though we try to say that we have got our independence, we haven't got our religious independence. We still practice the Victorian era kind of theology, and so which says when they say the story of Sodom and Gomorrah, that is not well researched, which is more about inhospitality. Quickly, people buy into it. And also, it is about especially gay sex. When they talk about homosexuality, people just think of two men having sex. And so that type of message, this is why they come here. This is why they attract our people, because they say this is foreign. Even though these practices have existed in centuries in our culture, but also our people have twisted the story a bit to play into the game of blame. So it's now a blame game. So if you say that LGBT homosexuality is foreign, then yes, you hold ground in order to resist the foreign attitude that is coming. So it is religious rhetoric and messaging that makes it appealing to our people. And sometimes I have politely reminded them that it seems we have forgotten our culture and our tradition, because most of the arguments that we base this discussion on are actually foreign. So in a polite way, I make our people think and come back home. But what had make it so attractive for them is a religious element that is attached to the discussion.
Great. Thank you so much for that insight, Davis. I think this is a good basis for more discussion later on. But let's go quickly to the other side of the continent of Africa, Nairobi, Kenya. Shamim, what's happening in Kenya or in East Africa? Maybe you can tell us a little bit about the context and what you're doing in combating the religiously based homo transphobia in Nairobi, Kenya, or East Africa.
Thank you so much, Paul. Can you hear me?
Yes, perfectly.
Great. So thank you very much. It's 9 p.m. here, and I think our context is very much similar to what Davis has been talking about. A lot of our experiences are shaped by religion, being that I think they say Kenya is about 70% religious, and this and Muslims. And like that has a lot of influence on society's perception about LGBT people, about gender and other issues, really. And in Kenya, for example, one of the things is we also have a Congress of Family conferences usually happening annually. And of course, the main thing is usually the issue about family, LGBT issues, and intersecting that with things like abortion, comprehensive sex education, and one of the very staunch people who speak against LGBT issues in Kenya usually calls it sexual liberation. There's a sexual liberation movement that includes things like access to abortion, LGBT, comprehensive sex education, and other things. And of course, these things have also been used by politicians as a political tool. Recently in Kenya, we have constitutional amendment bill. It's called the BBI, Building Bridges Initiative. And of course, we've had some religious leaders talking about they need to, amend the parts of the constitution which allow for LGBT people to thrive, or, for us to ask for our rights. The other thing, of course, is also the issue about LGBT not being an African thing. And I really agree with what Davis was saying, because religion is not an African thing. Most of religious, right? Not just Christianity. Can you hear me?
Yes, you're back. You were frozen a moment, but you're back. So
can you hear me?
Maybe better without video. Yeah, perfectly. Go ahead, Shamim.
Okay. Yeah. So when Muslims, mostly Muslim-dominated area, and I could see so much how religion plays for LGBT people. We are not allowed to go into, religious spaces. We are not allowed to share in our experiences or just allow ourselves to be. The other thing, of course, is the rhetorics that LGBT is seen as evil. Currently, I think beginning of COVID-19, we had people saying that, LGBT is associated with, like COVID. We are the ones who have caused COVID-19 to come to Kenya and to the world generally. Sometimes we also had, some time back during our Repeal 162 last year, we had some LGBT people who have had sought asylum in other countries who are Kenyans, they would be lured to come back home. Maybe they're told your grandma is sick, so someone would come back, and when they come back, they are forced into conversion therapy. And like this was something on the rise a lot. The other thing I think, of course, to talk about is the foreign influence of our movement. And I think we've done so much work in the Kenyan movement, LGBT movement. But then when we have, for example, Muslim, very, very well-known Muslim religious leaders coming in and having a conference on women and then talking about LGBT issues, of course, in a bad light. Of course, this really sets back our work, being that a lot of our work has been advocacy with faith leaders in different faith or religions. The other thing, of course, is, well, I would say like families being used also as a tool for driving religious rhetorics against LGBT people. We have a lot of LGBT families LGBT persons who are rejected by their families, going through conversion therapies by their families, through their families, just using religion, right? And from our side, what we have been doing is, so I work with two organizations. One is Church World Service. Church World Service, what we have been doing is engaging religious leaders to see how much violence religion has been causing to queer people, but also looking at religion as a tool of advocacy. That the same which, like in the past was used for slavery, is now being used for inclusion. And so we can still use the same religion for that purpose, for, like including LGBTI people and being a tool of advocacy. But also the other thing is, like recently, which I'm mostly excited about, is like talking to Muslim leaders. And contrary to my personal expectations, I think most of them are very, very welcoming and just willing to listen in, and also seeing that, a lot of LGBT people have caused harm to themselves, have died of suicide just because of what religion has done to us, right? Then the other part is just pushing that forward and seeing what power religion has. As I've said before, religion has power to influence politics in Kenya, policies, and so, like having those allies in those strategic places. With Inner Space, which is an organization, is really just looking at us as queer people who are also, like identifying with religion, especially Islam. How do we redefine Islam for ourselves? I don't want to look at Islam as a religion that, criticizes my existence or looks at me as a lesser being because I'm a woman, or because really empowering, like just redefining Islam for myself and also my community. And also, like finding power within and advocating for our spaces. And if that is not allowed, then we can find our own worshiping places where a trans person can lead prayers, or a disabled person can lead prayers, and that is allowed. That is, like that is supported. Unlike in, I'd say, for Islam, where that is not allowed. If you're an intersex person, for example, you're not allowed to lead prayers because, well, you're not cisgender man who is straight, so you're not accepted in that context. But I think that has been really empowering. And also, like, finally, just telling our stories, like for people to be able to see that we are here. And I know, like, it's a journey for a lot of us, that visibility is not something that would maybe happen for most of us. But then for those of us who can be visible and just being able to tell the world that, listen, we're here. And, like, we're not going to be arrested because we're just here. Yeah. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much. I mean, that's also sobering to hear how much is going on in Kenya, but great to hear how the movement is responding to it. And I love your personal perspective and like the power in you. Like, well, if they don't accept us, then we make our own spaces. Like, I will determine how my religion will see me. No one else will do that. So I think that's really powerful. I asked Davis the question as well, and also to you, like, Shamin, what makes the message of these, like, radical fundamentalist people so attractive for politicians and like the general public? What makes it so attractive? I don't get it.
I'd say money. I'd say money and power, right? Because in Kenya, we like to say money has been poured. And so, yeah, money is being poured for, because this is also an advocacy for them. It's also a drive for them. And so a lot of resources has to be poured, and our politicians love money. So that is something. Because we also have like allies in private who are politicians, but they won't be out because, well, they are funded by so and so to talk about against LGBT work. But when money is there and that money gives them power, our current deputy president in the past has said, if I get into power, we'll stun these people. So then people, like resonate with that. Yeah.
Like you make my head spin. Like we need more money in our movement to do the same. So that might be an easy solution. But thank you so much for that, Shamim. Let's go quickly to Belize, to the Caribbean. Ifashina, can you tell us a little bit about the context and what happened in Belize recently? Because we heard really disturbing news on recent events in Belize. So Ifashina, the floor is yours.
Mabuga, I greet you in the language of my ancestors. I am Garifuna. I live in a predominantly Garifuna community in the south of Belize, Dangriga, and I am glad to be a part of this panel. And it's so interesting as I listen to my colleagues from the continent, because you would think that we are actually in one space when you hear the experiences, because the experiences are the same. So you know that this is an organized attack for sure. This is an organized movement against us, against people. And it's not surprising, because the enslavement of Africans was definitely organized. The annihilation of indigenous populations was definitely organized. The invasion of our lands and subsequent exploitation and robbing of our lands was organized, was planned, and that plan continues to be in place and fully funded and supported. Clearly, the messages are exactly the same across the board. Of course, yes, they will pay attention to your specific context to attack you from the angle that you might be most familiar with. So in the case of Belize, for example, there was a billboard that was up and it talked about rice and beans. Rice and beans is one of our national dishes. And Belize is very multicultural, but the Creole culture is dominant because, well, it's a culture that essentially all of the ethnic groups are a part of. They end up speaking Creole and they end up eating Creole food, even though they have their own languages and their own food and their own beliefs and so on. So the national dish is rice and beans. And so they put up this billboard that says, a man and a woman in marriage is like rice and beans. They just go together. Now, of course, when we go into our discussions, when locally, it's like, but there's stuff missing, because the meal is not just rice and beans. Like, we don't just eat rice and beans. It comes with stewed chicken or fried fish, and it has fried plantains and salad. Now, salad is a term that they use for the LGBT persons, right? So the salad would be missing, and there are lots of people that would not appreciate rice and beans without the salad, so that was like a counter argument. But the thing is, you had these billboards, and of course it costs money to put up billboards, and they were strategically placed, only to find out that apparently the Equal Opportunities Bill was about to go to be read in the House, and they were already mobilized because they were aware that it was going to be read in the House, or that there were plans for it to be read in the House. And so this was their campaign to get the public in a frenzy to say no to this bill even going into the House, even being passed any at all. And this has been their consistent attack. There was the Health and Family Life Education program that was being implemented in our school system, in the primary school system, so that we could introduce comprehensive sexuality education. There has been a consistent attack against that, simply because providing such education would mean that children would be fully educated about sexuality being a natural thing, being a human thing. Of course, sessions would have been, or lessons would have been age appropriate, but it was for children to have information which traditionally had been denied them. And right now we have such high rates of adolescent pregnancies, right? We have such high rates of unsafe abortion, for example. We have high rates of sexually transmitted infections and other sexual and reproductive health and rights issues. Yet these organized groups consistently attack anything that will allow for us to exercise our right to choice, or for us to be able to make responsible, informed decisions about what should happen to our bodies. So you don't hear them on the issue of child marriage any at all. And there's so many children that are married off in the name of traditions. And they happily, their pastors happily marry little girls to adult men that could be their fathers, men that could be their grandfathers. They happily do that, but they're not there when those women are abused. They're not there when they face serious health issues. They're not there when they are in poverty, when they're abandoned by those men. They're not there when they are abused, assaulted by those men and neglected, them and their children. You see, they're deprived of their other rights, like their right to education. They're not there. You don't hear the churches on any of those issues, any at all. But they have been very vocal and very visible against the health and family life education, vocal and very visible against the national gender policy, vocal and very visible against the Section 53 constitutional challenge, which thankfully was a success. They were very present and visible in the appeal to that ruling of the Section 53, and they were very visible and active when it came to the national consultations in relation to the Equal Opportunities Bill. And they continue on that campaign, because when it comes to human rights, they want a distinction, and they even ensure that they push a violence towards, but they use subliminal messaging, right? So they designed this an image that people could use for their profile, and the image had the word kill in red and the word bill, because it's kill the bill. Not even let's revise the bill. There was no room for negotiation. The Equal Opportunities Bill has 19 protected characteristics. It factors in several areas of discrimination against women, areas of discrimination against persons based on their sex, being male or female, areas of discrimination based on physical ability, areas of discrimination based on socioeconomic status and ethnicity, political affiliation, those things. This bill is supposed to be comprehensive in protecting our rights and being able to give us easy access to justice, because yes, in the laws as they stand, you could take a person to court. What does it cost to take a person to court? My godson was left out of class. He was not 14 yet, and that is the age of mandatory primary education. And when he was in high school, because he had locks, the school took him out of class. For 70 days, they did that to him because he had locks and they wanted him to cut his hair off. He had a right to his conscience, his beliefs. The Constitution guarantees that. So the family had to raise funds to challenge the institution for discriminating against him. But everybody doesn't have the resources to go to the courts. But that's what the churches say. That we already have that in place. So why establish a bill special for that? So they organize. There have been instances where girls have been kidnapped, raped, murdered. Women are unsafe. They're being shot in the street or shot in their homes. They're being assaulted by their partners or by others. The churches have nothing to say about that. Children are being neglected. Women are dying because they have access unsafe abortion. But you hear them always talking about, you know, you're supposed to have your children. And so hypocritical, especially from the Catholic Church, where those men who are priests don't have any children, right? And it's okay for them to not have children, but at the same time, they will open their mouths to try to control women's bodies and force us to have children and not have a say over having children. If we are able or not able to take care of our children, we can't take our children to them to provide school, to provide their basic necessities. They don't offer that either. You understand? So that's the kind of atmosphere we are dealing with here, as they consistently, they haven't stopped, they consistently attack us when it comes to our rights, seeking our rights, and even questioning our humanity, as if, okay, these people are not human beings, so they don't deserve these rights. So that is
why is their message so resonating by with politicians, with the general public, that in the end the bill was taken off, even if it offers so many protections for so many people, and like, really, as you say, it couldn't even be negotiated, it was just removed. Why
they're in bed together, Paul. The church and the politicians are in bed with each other, right? They benefit from each other. It's a symbiotic relationship that they have. This is why the masses have to get involved, because the masses face discrimination. And once they are able to see that the discrimination that LGBT persons face is also the discrimination that women face, that girls face, that people of color face, that the poor face, that the people who maybe are not part of a particular ethnic group or are not part of a particular class face, then we start to see commonalities and then take a stance on those commonalities. This is why when I speak up, I don't only talk about the challenges that persons face for being LGBT. There's intersectionality. You're not only facing the discrimination just because of who you love, because who you love isn't obvious necessarily to anybody. I walk on the street by myself, you walk on the street, you walk on the street. Nobody can say, oh, this person loves this other person. You can't say that. But you can see the color of my skin, though. And you can see from my appearance that I'm female, and you make that assumption by how I dress because of gender, you know, how we are socialized. By the way, they also create confusion in relation to the word gender. So they because they're conservative, they don't want to use the word sex, and they want everybody to accept gender as a distinction, the biological distinction among human beings. But that is a lie, and that is a lie that they keep spreading. Your sex is biological. You're male, you're female, or intersex. That's biological. You're born with these kind of chromosomes, the X and Y or XX chromosomes, or different variations of X and Y chromosomes, and those affect your physical makeup, both what you can see outside and what's inside. That's what sex is. Gender is the society's construction of how you're supposed to be and how you're supposed to look based on the sex that you are born. And that changes from society to society. So in certain societies, a person might be born with a penis, but what they wear looks like a dress, right? Because clothes don't make your sex. Clothes are just clothes. You wear those from the outside. And it is not your sex that determines your ability to chop grass, or to cook food, or to clean a house, or to sew clothes, or any of that. It is simply your human capacity. Once you have the skill, once you have the training, you're able to do certain things. But in our various societies, there is a distinction of who is supposed to do this and who is supposed to do that. And that is gender. That is socially constructed, but they create that confusion within the society. And that is what we constantly have to be battling, is correcting the lies that they consistently are telling the population.
Thanks so much, Ifashina, for that. And while we're trying to get Davis back, Shamim, maybe you want to comment on what Ifashina was saying, because There's so much going on in Kenya as well, and maybe from your own perspective, please. You're on mute. Yes, go ahead.
Sorry, Paul, say that again.
I said, like, if you hear Ifashina, maybe you would like to comment on what Ifashina was saying, looking at it from the Kenyan context and your own personal perspective. So please go ahead if you would like to comment on what Ifashina was just saying.
Okay, yeah, I think I really agree with what Ifashina was saying, particularly on, like the silence of religious leaders when it comes to gender-based violence, child marriage. Recently, we've had, like very high cases of teenage pregnancies, and like the church, the mosque, the religious leaders are very silent about it. And even when they speak, it's very, very problematic. Like even at that age, they still blame young girls, not looking at, like the issues that these girls have been defiled and, like things like that. They need to voice up their voices. But I also think the other issue is religious leaders also, I think, finding themselves at this sort of dilemma where if we have allies, and sometimes they come to me and they say, like, we don't know how to be allies in a context that is not very welcoming, particularly if, say, the quote small churches or the religious leaders at grassroots level are supportive, but then say at national level, the people who have access to tools of power do not really support our cause. Then how do we go about that? How do we show support in public when we don't necessarily have that space to show support in public? So I think that's a question for Ifashina, but also like maybe I could just say one way is for us, we've also just been looking at support at community level, because sometimes when violence happens, we need that leader at the grassroots level to come in and, like influence the people there, especially the youth. But yeah, I'm happy to hear from Ifashina.
Well, they have access to us. We're a community-based organization. Our doors are open. We have to say, because of our level of work within the community, we're able to go into the schools and provide information to children. And the center, our center is one that, young people and adults, families have access to, so we reach to the wider community, and we are open to collaborating with anyone, to speaking with anyone, to partnering, establishing alliances, because we think about the community. We don't think about just individuals. We think about community, and we want to create a better and safer community. Because when you look at the issues that we face, we're all facing them. Certain communities disproportionately, yes, but at the end of the day, it's all of us. And as when it comes to holding politicians, I sometimes call them politicians, accountable, we pay taxes, and so they have an obligation to do what is in the best interest of all the citizens, because we pay taxes, we pay their salaries, they actually work for us. So it is getting the masses to understand that too, that we are not the ones that are working for the politicians. The politicians work for us. Our political leaders, we have a contract with them. We allow them to make decisions on our behalf. And if they are not making decisions that are in our best interest, then they must be held accountable and they must be removed from office, because we pay them. It is not the other way around. They don't pay us, we pay them. So it is consistently giving the people that understanding, and letting even the people who are in the religious organizations know this nation is ours. When a storm comes, it hits everybody. It doesn't decide, well, I'm going to blow off this roof, but I won't blow off that roof. And I'm going to kill this one, but I won't kill that one. No, when it comes to natural disasters, when it comes to the negative impact of a pandemic, when it comes to the negative impact of anything, corruption by the government, we're all impacted by that. And if we are not working together, we're not going to correct those things that then end up affecting all of us, right? So that's the point of dialogue that we maintain, is that this is, if you care about this community like how we care about this community, then you will join us. Otherwise, you're a part of the problem, and we will call you out on that.
But like Ifashina, it's the bigger issue of the secularization of an entire system. How to get religion out of the issues and state affairs. Like there in most of the countries, there's a strong separation between state and church. In reality, it looks very different. What are we doing wrong as a movement, or as movements and civil society as a whole, that we're not getting there? Actually, in many countries, I have the feeling that the religion is creeping in through many other ways to take over the state. I'd love to hear your perspectives on that from all three of you. Davis, happy to have you back. Sorry that we have lost you for a moment. I hope you got that question. Maybe you can start answering.
Did you hear the question?
You're on mute. You have to unmute yourself. Yeah.
All right then.
Yes, now you're back.
Yeah,
Go
so
ahead.
can you hear me now?
Yes, perfectly.
Okay. I think, Paul, if I did pick up on your last comment, you were asking how we will be able to address or be able to work in the midst of the challenging. What was your last comment? Sorry.
Like the question was, like, religion has so much influence on state and state power. Like we're getting something really wrong there in having a secular state where religion and religious figures don't have influence over all these things that Ifashna was saying. So how can we work to get back to a separation between church and state?
Yeah, thank you. That's a very good question. I think in Ghana or in West Africa, it will take a long time, because you elect parliamentarian to office, and when they get there, they go to work with their Bible, instead of focusing on the law of the land, of the people. They begin to preach and quote Bible. We have had election, and in the last few days here, and even the Electoral Commission will start any deliberation with prayer, and we end with prayer. So getting them to decolonize themselves, states from religion, will be difficult. That is why it is important that we ourselves do not associate ourselves from religion. One of the tactics or method that we are using in Interfaith Diversity Network of West Africa to engage is that we are in all of these spaces, and so we do not detach ourselves. So we refuse to go away, and when they begin to talk about us, we make them know that we are there, even in the family, even in the church. I hear my friend talk about the Catholics and the priests not having children. I mean, we as people of faith, we understand celibacy, and we understand the doctrine of the church. We are telling them we are not against their doctrine, but also that the doctrine affects us as members of and part of the church. We are part of the religious community. And so slowly we are getting to have that discussion. Like when I say to my MP that you are voted to serve the people and not to serve your religious order or your religious community alone. Not only the Christians vote you, the Muslims vote you, people of faith and people of non-faith also vote you. So please be careful. They are listening. It's going to be a long journey, but let us be available in those spaces. Let not avoid them, and let us not make it they versus us, because that's some of the things that I have seen, that some people, once they hear about religion, they frown their face, they get angry. They think religion is as taboo as religion think that LGBT people are taboo. If we go on that route, it will be difficult. Understand, how does the religious people think? What is driving them to behave in the way that they do? And then let's look for a common ground. Here in Ghana, we go beyond the discussion of human sexuality. We show them that we have other things that we bring on board. For instance, teenage pregnancy is highly alarming here. And of course, we know those who are getting those girls pregnanted. And so we try to engage with the religious leaders, telling them this is more of an issue than two gay people having sex. And once we bring the topic, they begin to listen to us, then we use the opportunity to also put our concern bit by bit and bit. And so it's important that you understand your locality, understand the people that are opposing you and the people that are your allies, and then understand where you can find a common ground to raise the issues and to discuss and work with the issues. But it will take a long time for our Ghana or African politicians or religious or government leaders to understand that state and religion are separate and should be kept so.
Well, we're trying to get Shamin back. Kifashina.
Yes, I fully agree with you, Davis. And there's a saying, you catch more flies with honey than with vinegar. So keeping the lines of communication open and maintaining a positive stance is always better. That has worked for humanity throughout history. And that is one of the things that we want to continue to practice. That's why I said that the channels of communication remain open. And from the side of LGBT plus activism, we've met with the bishops, the Methodist bishop, the Anglican bishop, the Catholic bishop, right? Because we think it's important to talk with people. The more you talk to people and they get to understand you, the less the conflicts, because a lot of the disparity is because of lack of understanding and fear. Ignorance is one of the biggest problems. But the more people start to see and understand, but this is, I get this, I understand this, then it changes the dynamic. So we can't give up when it comes to reaching out and talking about and being able to dialogue, but still, of course, holding them accountable. I remember telling a Baptist pastor once, I said, this work that I'm doing, because at the time I was dealing with HIV education, I was like, this work I'm doing is Jesus's work. This is what Jesus, I know that if Jesus were walking the earth right now, he would be with me, distributing condoms, educating people, talking to people about how to be safe. That's what he would have done, because when you hear about him, the thing that is consistent about him is that he was respectful of others. He did not discriminate. And that is why his own people killed him, because he was revolutionary. So if you're truly saying that you are truly Christian, then you would be Christ-like. You wouldn't be stuck in the Old Testament talking about Leviticus or anything that happened in the Old Testament. There's so much problems in the Old Testament. There is incest, there is rape, there is, it's just so horrible what went on in the Old Testament. Why aren't we focusing on the New Testament? Jesus sounds like a very cool dude. He was a vibesy person. I would have liked to break bread with the man, because the man was real and down to earth. But the people that are claiming to represent him and represent his ideology, they are hypocrites. They disgrace the man, really and truly. They disgrace his name, because really and truly the work that we do when it comes to making our society safe, and why did he go through all these parables talking about the Good Samaritan, and this is how you must treat other people, you must love and respect each other, because it's so important that we get along with each other and work together and be our best selves in whatever it is we do. How they miss that, how they miss all of that, to then be preaching against people, to then be preaching hate and creating that divide and all that negativity. That's why I say I call them out on that, because if you're saying that you're following this doctrine that you're referring to. I can read. I understand what the Bible says. And what the man said was respect others and treat them as how you would like to be treated. And he said, don't be focusing on the speck in nobody's eye. Focus on the plank in your own one. So where are they missing these things? Taking care of the sick and feeding the hungry. Isn't that he gave them a lot of work, you know? He gave a lot of work for them to do, and they're focusing their energy against
like your question, I so see the pattern and like everywhere. We can talk for 3 hours. But I do have a question in the chat box that I want to put out, and hopefully the three of you can answer very, very briefly. Like Emma asked the question, like we spend so much time focusing on the negative messages that these people are putting out. Isn't it time for us to have like a good strategy and a bulk of positive messages that we want to send out to overpower them, to take over, instead of just focusing as a movement on all the negativity that these people are bringing? Shamin.
Okay, Sinead, sorry.
Because we lost you a moment, so I would give you the first opportunity to respond.
Sorry, I think Davis can go first so that I get the question.
Okay, good. Davis.
Thank you for giving me the same. Well, I think the positive stories and the counter narratives are there. The problem is that we don't have the platforms enough and the capacity and the resources to spread those positive stories. Here in Ghana, they control the mainstream media, so they control the message that goes out. But still, that doesn't stop us to tell in our own little community, to tell our own story in our blogs, in our website, in other spaces, because the most important thing about this discussion is not to adapt the Western, but to use our own languages to tell our story of liberation, our story of affirmation, our story of decolonizing ourselves. So support us to tell our story in our way that we know best, in our way that we can. The stories are there. Let us bring support and bring the story out. And in West Africa, here, in Ghana, here, the bishops, look, not all religious leaders actually are homophobic. Not all religious leaders actually are against us. There are many of them that are listening to us and understanding and learning. There are imams and Muslims that no longer see us as haram, that see us as human beings, even though some of them think that we need help. But the fact that they listen to us and create a space of dialogue shows that something is going on. But we need support to do it in a bigger stage, in a bigger platform. And that's, I think, one of the things that we need to begin to find ways to do. How do we document our stories? Many of our histories and our stories are not documented. And so there are affirming theology, liberation theology story, personal stories that change heart and mind. We need to begin to tell those stories and not just only flying the rainbow flag, but fly your heart to your community, and they will understand and attitude will change.
Great, thanks so much. Shamin, do you want to come in? You have 1 minute.
Yes.
Thank you. Can you hear me, Paul?
Yes, we can hear you.
Right. So I think there's definitely a place for dialogue that we need to engage our religious leaders, our community leaders, other people who influence minds and like ideologies in the communities. Now we have social media bloggers, we have different people, and I think that space for dialogue and just understanding like the intersectional part and the role that the different leaders play. I also like the idea of like what, for example, a lot of Kenyan activists are now doing, going back to our like our African history, and maybe also like trying to sort of humanize our stories, as what Davis is saying, that like LGBT people did not come after colonization. We were, like our communities were there for a long time, and looking back at those stories and being able to use our African history as a tool of advocacy. Of course, picking the good sides and the sides that would advance our advocacy, and also like being able to analyze where we currently are and why we are here. Sometimes I tell people, we advocate so much, so passionately, especially the like the other side, the anti-LGBT activists. We advocate so much for laws that are not even ours, right? For example, in Kenya, the parts of the penal code that criminalize same-sex sex are very much still, like colonial, and looking that we need to rethink what that means, what religion means to us as African people, and how can we use that religion to unite us and also like to humanize us, yeah. And I think also like the other thing is for us as also queer people to realize that like we sometimes have to create our own spaces, for example, for religious advocacy, and even for ourselves. As a Muslim queer woman, I may not necessarily be accepted in those spaces. It may not be accessible. As a trans person, for example, trans woman may not be accepted in a cis Muslim, like area women pray, but maybe creating spaces for ourselves that humanize us and like amplify our stories. Yeah, I think also like it's very important to just tell our stories out there in the different ways that we can, and like passing it on to our future generations, and also like creating a world of possibility. I think as a young person, I live sometimes in an ideal world where I try to imagine, okay, like religion is supposed to be all these good things that Ifashina was saying, even in Islam. I think also like the other thing is just to realize Islam or any religion is not monolithic. We are not all the same, right? I am a Muslim woman from Mombasa. There's a Muslim woman from Nairobi, and we have different experiences, have ways of looking at things different. Words are very different. So even how people have been translating the Quran, the Bible is very different. And I think as queer people, we can use that for our advantage. Thank you. Sorry. Well,
thank you, Shamin. Ifashina, I know your passion. If you can do very briefly the final word, that would be fantastic.
Well, I will just say that we need to stay on the positive. That is what will keep us, that is what has allowed us to survive all these atrocities for all these years. And the struggle continues, but as we continue to find common ground, we will be able to have success. And like David said, indeed, be our best selves, so that they end up loving us more than hating us, because what they end up to see is our humanity and the very priceless contribution that we make in our communities and our countries. That's what they need to see, not just who they think we sleep with, or how they think we have sex, or who they think we should love, but our humanity in the contribution, the very valuable contribution that we continue to make. And then they can just be like Jesus and love everybody and appreciate everybody for who they are. Let us show them that we are better followers of Christ than they are.
Amen. I close with that. Please, audience, thank you so much, panelists. A big virtual applause for this beautiful panel. Ifashina, Davis, Shamim, thank you so much for sharing your insights, wisdom, and work with us today. Really love talking to you. I hope we can continue this conversation at one point because it's fascinating talking to you. So thank you again. For all the people in this session, please join us at the main stage for the closing performance by